So flight as a subject, I think there are few subjects that seem to inspire people more than the dream of leaving the surface and being able to kind of go wherever you like. I spent 3 years, well, actually it was 3 years ago, I decided that actually I was up for a pretty unusual challenge. I'd spent 16 years in the City of London, actually as an oil trader for BP, but I've never lost the passion for taking on an unusual challenge. So around 3 years ago, I hatched this idea, somewhat inspired by some of the background that Rolf has kindly shared, that as mad as it sounded, could you use your brain as the flight computer and the gyro, and could you use your body as the airframe, and approach this amazing realm of flight, human flight, in that manner? And it does sound crazy, and we didn't really tell many people about it at the time, but this is the journey I'm going to share with you. So, as a demonstration of how amazing the human body can be, I used to be able to get close to doing that, but not really that well. That's a great example of what you can do if you just keep training and put your mind and your body to a challenge. So I thought if somebody can hold their weight in that way, then surely you can support your weight with your body by leaning on some form of propulsion. You don't need to have a seat and a stick or a yoke. So why not try and use that machine, the body? But you are missing something. You're missing a form of propulsion. And it just so happens that my whole family background, not that I had followed it up to that point, my whole family background was in the world of aeronautics and aviation. So I was fairly familiar with these jet engines. And I'm saying these jet engines because I'm talking about little tiny small ones. And I had a suspicion that that would be the form of propulsion that might be ideal for this unusual idea. So this was ground zero. And I'll just remind the sound guys just to be gentle on everybody's ears with this. This was the ground zero moment when we got one of these engines and started testing what they could do. Oh, well done. That does usually blast people's ears. So this was, yes, around 2.5, 3 years ago in a country lane in the UK. There is a aluminium tube with a hand grip in it and a micro jet engine on my arm and a mop bucket for a fuel tank. And that thing was pretty impressive. It was pushing with about 22 kilos of force, and actually it was probably one of the most important steps because it taught us that despite the spindle spinning at 120,000 RPM, actually it was really benign. It was really spongy and gentle. It wasn't trying to tear your arm off. It wasn't fighting you from a gyroscopic point of view. It was really very calm in a strange way. So if you've got one, then why not try two? Now we've upgraded the mop bucket to a fuel tank on my back, and at this moment you can now see or get some idea of how much force there is. That was 50 kilos, nearly 50 kilos of push, and I kind of failed to hold it. You'll notice a common theme in these little clips. If you've done and tried one and then two, so what happens if you try four? You can very much see the bootstrapping element of this. You saw all the electronics all zip-tied to the outside of these arm assemblies. We have a very strong, and still have a very strong ethos of having an idea and immediately identifying how we can go and test it, rather than get bogged down trying to design a perfect solution. This is how we made such quick progress. This was only several months, 2 or 3 months, alongside a day job, since that standing in, with one engine. And you can see I'm not coming down so quick then. It really is starting to work quite well. But I had this idea, why not use the legs as part of the support structure? Because actually your legs are load-bearing, I mean, they're better than your arms, and that was a good theory, and we did persevere with it, but you can see it was quite hard to learn how to do it, and I, at this stage, was experimenting with a tether. The problem is the tether just created yet another force, in addition to the forces on all the arms and legs, to try and manage, so we ditched it in favor for falling over more often. This is another blind alleyway of experimentation. This is now enough engines, enough power to take off, but having 3 on each arm was ludicrous. The power was insane and the weight was ridiculous. So we stuck with the idea of arms and legs. This is still 4 engines. You can see me sort of moonwalking around, but it was very, very hard, because as soon as you jump and bend your knee, you can see what happens. I was quite proud I'm not falling over them. This was the kind of learned setup that seemed to work quite well, relatively well. 2 engines on each arm, 1 on each leg, but again, trying to manage this crazy collection of forces, especially on the legs. Every time you bend that knee, obviously the force just rotates you around. However, persevering and employing only about 6 months since that point where we had 1 engine on the arm, we did the following, which is still probably the best, I suppose one of our proudest moments as a company. This is the moment when, and we wasn't even a company then, we actually achieved the first flight, the first 6-second flight. There's no wires, there's no tethers, there's just a very scared pilot, me, trying to hold my composure until I could manage to land it. I'm still fighting my right leg. You can see my right leg doesn't want to do what it's doing. There you go, that was the first flight. So that was October 2016. And since, oh, thank you. This little clip is from actually the Guinness World Record we set some months later, but it's a nice little summary of and actually it's a really old suit that now when I look at that. But this is a nice kind of contrast, and some silly music, which you might recognize. This is a good contrast to that wobbly-legged flight, and this is only probably 6-8 months later when we'd actually set it up as a company. And you can see now, instead of an engine on the back of each leg, they progressed to an engine kind of in the buttock region, which worked quite well, and it was better than it being at the end of your legs. And then eventually we consolidated them into one larger engine, which for a bunch of reasons is just more efficient. But fundamentally, all this stability and control, which looks fake, it looks fake when it's in front of you, all of that is entirely down to managing thrust here and thrust here and thrust here. And if you want to go up, you just bring your arms in, and then that blows down harder than you need in order to lift off the ground. And if you want to go down again, you just flare your arms out. All the rest is entirely intuitive. And you can see there, yeah, chasing jet skis around and things. It was a pretty awesome flight. I'm going to skip to the next one because we've got way better flights than this now. We, having launched the company behind this, Gravity, in April 2017, have now, I stand here having done 80 events in 26 countries. We've generated well over $3 million of revenue from all of those events. We've even sold 2 suits as well. I'll show you a picture of one of those in a minute. I've done 4 TED Talks. We raised £500,000, $640,000 accidentally in a car park in the top right-hand corner there, in the very, very, very first event outside of the UK. That was Tim Draper who wrote me that check after seeing the demonstration. Did stuff with Tom Cruise. We've done all sorts of things. It's been a wild ride. I put this in only just recently. This is an example of one of the recent events. This was in Tokyo, opening a baseball game in front of 30,000 people with one of the later suits. The stalks, by the way, are some of the interesting 3D cameras we tend to use, or 360 cameras. But you see what happens when I land. I'm glad the trigger guy was careful, because I flew over those only a few seconds before that. So commercially, we do flight training for people if you want to come and learn how to do this. We do it not necessarily in that hangar anymore, but we do it as a tethered experience, so you really can't, I mean, it's safer than walking around. You just dangle off the tether if you get it wrong. But a bit like riding a bicycle, you just have to have that safe period to be able to feel the balance and control. And I've got a clip here. This is a really old clip. This guy, this is his 4th minute of training. This isn't normal. 4 minutes of training to do this. There's no tether at this stage because we got bored waiting for him to fall over, and he never fell over. You can see him quite elegantly vectoring down and lifting up and then flaring out to come down again. All those little micro adjustments and wobbles that his brain is doing now without him thinking. It is a ludicrous discovery that your brain is just such an amazing machine at learning to balance a new object like this. That was the last suit we sold for $440,000. STEM is a really key part of what we do. I'll get onto the race series in a second, but we've flown at schools and universities all over the world whenever we can fit it into the diary, trying to inspire another generation, especially when you're competing against iPads and iPhones. I've got a 10-year-old and a 12-year-old, so I know about this. If you fly a 1,000-horsepower jet suit in front of them, they do tend to look up. As you can see there. Yes, there's a whole variety of events all over the world. Now, what do you do with this? Well, we're going to go racing them. That's kind of why, thanks to the support of Serbia Creates and WORLD.MINDS, we flew at Ada Lake yesterday. I would use the analogy of this being a bit like a Formula One car. And this is a good example of the kind of swim that Alex, my colleague, went for yesterday. That wasn't yesterday, but it looks very similar. If you turn and get the banking wrong, then you tend to lose altitude very quickly, but it's all part of the learning. Why not take guys and girls from different sporting backgrounds, train them, as you see, it doesn't take very long, and then go and assemble over water, because then you keep it safe, and in fact you make the crashes part of the drama. There's a water-triggered Lifejacket, which we've used more times than I'm proud of now. That's the wingsuit we're working on. We'll come to that in a minute. But why not run that as an entertainment spectacle that tours around the world, inspiring the next generation, driving that STEM agenda, and I suppose really helping us to accelerate the technology, because human competition is by far the best way to push it. And on that subject, in terms of the next frontiers, if you think about it, we are at the moment just blowing air downwards to lift off. The Harrier aircraft and even the F-35 in the hover mode are examples of that. But what happens if you start converting that power into forward motion? As you see, we can go pretty quick. We've now set the speed record internally at about 90 kilometers an hour. The world record that we set formally was almost half of that, so we should go and do that event again sometime. But that's just not even scraping the sides, really. If you start converting that power to forward speed, then why not deploy a wing surface? Why not start generating aerodynamic lift? Then you don't need anywhere near the same amount of fuel or power to be able to travel extremely quickly and actually sit in that airflow from a safety point of view as well. It's even better. So that's not a good example, but it's an example of the kind of R&D we're doing. That's very slowed down. There's the leg wing, which has worked brilliantly, and an experimental mounting of a wing on the back. This is all the stuff that's not slowing down behind the scenes despite all the events. And this little clip, it's a bit grainy because I kind of outrun the drone. This is where we set the 90-kilometer-hour record. I basically just moved my legs apart, the Ram Air leg wing inflated, and I flattened out, then ran out of lake and pulled up, because as you see at the last clip, how high I was above the jet skis. It's super exciting, the frontier here, because, as I say, this is going to extend the flight time and the range massively. I've got a minute left, and I'm going to share something with you. This is quite cool. This is a 360 camera over Malibu Beach at sunset, playing with a kite surface, kind of thing we do. But more excitingly, I think, and usually people like this, we've kept in the back of this slide pack the outtakes of all the falling over. Because if we've learned anything from this journey, it's about how to manage failure and risk. There's a lot of talk about this, especially in the corporate world I used to come from. To innovate, or to be an entrepreneur, you've got to take risk. You've got to learn from failure. But the critical thing is just identify what is the worst that's going to happen if that failure occurs. If you can get back up again, financially, reputationally, or from a safety point of view, then get the hell on and take the risk. That's all we do. So on that, it's this one here. So these are quite benign. These are me falling over in the farmyard I mentioned. Lots of little iPhone clips. And they get more dramatic as we get more capable. That was deliberately blowing an engine up. That was running out of fuel. That was running out of fuel. That was not making a corner like Alex did yesterday, so I've done it. That was one engine didn't start up correctly. That was me letting go of the throttle trigger. I don't know really why I did that. Mournfully walking back. This was a colleague who got scared of a flag. There was nothing technically wrong with the equipment. That was a compressor stall for those enthusiasts in the room. That was an engine failure. We were pushing them really hard at an air show in the UK over water. We tend to push it really hard. And then there's an even more dramatic one here. And I think we've got, yeah, there we go. See, there's the water deployment life jacket. It goes off within a second of hitting the water. It's a very clever thing. This was in the Maldives, disappointingly. There were some cool clips, and that was in the UK. You've seen that one already. I think that might be the last one. And I did some shaming flying around, just, of course, to check he was okay, but also just to remind him that's not what we're supposed to be doing. I think that's the last clip. So look, I will hand over to Rolf, and I think you've got a couple of questions or so. But I want to just say as well, on this tile here, if you want to see the footage even from yesterday, if you look at Instagram particularly, but any of the platforms like YouTube, then the @TakeOnGravity handle, it's all on there. So thank you very much.